I've got some tips I'm going to share with you that will help you navigate the partner buyout process smoothly and with minimal stress. Done correctly, you can escape a challenging situation unscathed. If you take these steps, you have a very good opportunity to buy out your partner with minimal distraction, emotional distress, or worse, risk of litigation. Done incorrectly, it can be disastrous for you, your partner, and the company as a whole. Once you decide you're going to at least try to buy out your partner, you need to read your shareholder or operating agreement. There may be provisions inside that agreement that dictate the process or the circumstances and the process under which a buyout can take place. And unless your partner agrees to waive those, then that's going to be the way that that process is going to work out, whether you like it or not. Now, you should do this before the next step, which is to get your attorney involved. A lot of people will just not read the agreement. You need to have command of the basic concepts and the basic parameters and terms of the buyout process before you talk to your attorney to make sure that you and your attorney can be on the same page. Generally, the buyout clause, which is called a buy-sell provision, will not take up a whole lot of space in the operating agreement. Then you call your attorney. Make sure that your attorney reads the agreement the same way that you do. You and he or she are going to come to a mutual understanding, which will help you set forth the process for moving forward with the purchase. It's critical that you not attempt to have your company attorney perform or represent you in the buyout. In many cases, if not most cases, your company attorney is going to be conflicted. Generally speaking, it's a bad idea for your corporate attorney to represent you or your partner in this transaction. Next, you need to determine whether or not this is going to be a friendly or a hostile transaction. One of the other dimensions of a partner buyout process is whether this is a voluntary or an involuntary transaction. Sometimes a partner buyout is required by contract. So in modern operating agreements, there will be a clause that says if you are divorcing, that you automatically have to sell your shares to your other partners or back to the company because the company does not want your former spouse as a shareholder, right? If a shareholder suffers a disability that forces you to retire, you can't work in the business anymore, that will trigger a forced purchase or forced sale. If your partner declares bankruptcy, that may trigger a forced purchase because, again, you don't necessarily want a bank or some other lender, maybe a loan shark, holding shares in your company, right? Of course, if you die, there's going to be a clause in the agreement that says there's an immediate sale of the shares from your estate. There are many instances in which a partner buyout is actually triggered. It could very well be a friendly transaction. Maybe your business partner is simply retiring after years of great partnership and service to the company. This is their reward. This is usually the best case scenario. Maybe your partner has said that they want to be bought out simply because they want to get out and they want to do something else. Maybe they've encountered difficult financial circumstances and they simply need to become liquid. And in this case, you're doing them a service. Those are all scenarios under which you could characterize a buyout as friendly. However, not all buyouts are friendly. I want to emphasize this one point. One of the most dangerous things that can happen in a partner buyout is when the buyer thinks that the seller is going to be a willing seller or they're going to be enthusiastic about the sale. That's dangerous because it tempts you into skipping some of these steps, into skipping best practices because you think, oh, we're good friends, we've been great business partners for X number of years. Yeah, I'm sure he wants to sell. And then you find out that he doesn't particularly want to sell. Might even be surprised that you want to buy him out. Might be insulted that you want to buy him out. Has hurt feelings that feels that you want to just get rid of him and that the contribution he's making to the company isn't being valued. And very quickly, the conversation about the buyout turns very negative. When and if that happens, you're going to be very glad that you had the discipline to follow these initial steps. Not all buyouts are friendly. Maybe you and your partner have had disagreements over the strategic direction of the company. Maybe you have a different view in terms of whether or not you should be building the business to scale versus a lifestyle business, and therefore you're putting in different amounts of work into the business. Maybe you have even stronger disagreements for whatever reason, and the buyout is going to be hostile. You need to understand that because that's going to impact the tenor of the negotiations. Once you've read your shareholder agreement, once you've gotten your attorney involved, once you've determined whether it's a hostile or a friendly transaction, get an independent valuation done. You need to understand what it is that you're buying. And in most cases, your counterpart is probably going to get their own valuation done as well. In fact, your buy-sell agreement may call for an independent valuation to be done that will set the price. I've seen cases where 3 valuations have to be done, where the buyer and the seller each pick a valuation provider. They'll come up with their own value, and then if the two numbers are far apart, then a third valuation is done that in some way reconciles the two, and that will be the valuation that governs. So plan on getting a valuation done, but even if your buy-sell agreement doesn't require you to get a valuation done, it's still a good idea. Once you have the valuation done, that's going to tell you how much money you're going to need to come up with in order to buy out your partner. So make sure that you have the money. If you can't write the check yourself comfortably, you're going to need to arrange the financing from somebody else. Do that in advance. Do not make an offer to buy the company without knowing where the money is actually coming from. If you make an offer and then have to back out because you didn't have the financing arranged, that will poison even the most friendly of buyout discussions. And then finally, make a good faith offer that is both clear and actionable. A common mistake I see made with partner buyouts is everybody's afraid to make the first move. But if you want to buy out your partner, you should be making the first move. In most cases, you're going to be initiating the discussion, so it's appropriate that you make the first move. Don't try to be passive aggressive about it. Don't start throwing numbers out there and say, would you think about this? Would you agree to this? That just wastes everybody's time. It's confusing. It actually, again, poisons the nature of the negotiations. Instead, work with your attorney to draw up a letter of intent or a formal purchase offer that says, I want to buy you out for X number of dollars under these terms. Maybe it's a buyout over time. Maybe there's some kind of earn out. Maybe it's a note. Whatever it is, put that offer in writing and just put it out there. Don't mess around. Don't try to be passive aggressive with it. Or be prepared to have the tables turned on you. You may initiate a buyout process with your partner, and then your partner says, you know what? I actually want to buy you out, especially after you've made the buyout offer, right? And this is why you want to lead with a good faith offer, because if you come out with a low ball offer, that increases the risk that your partner says, you know what, if that's your price, I think I'm actually a buyer rather than a seller. And then if you back off and say, no, 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 I don't want to sell at that price, you look like you made a bad faith offer. And that's going to lead to lasting tension for as long as the two of you remain in the business. One of the things to keep in mind is that unless your operating agreement or shareholder agreement specifically says so, your partner is not obligated to sell. So let's take a very common example that you want to buy out your partner because you feel like your partner isn't working as hard as you, isn't contributing as much. Unless you have something in your agreement that says that your partner has to document working a certain amount of hours, they have to contribute a certain amount of value to the firm, they don't necessarily have to work at all. And they're your business partner, and your only option, if you don't want to sell, is the only options are to either live with that arrangement for as long as you can, or walk away from the company yourself, potentially leaving a valuable asset on the table. In those cases, you have to overpay to get your partner to agree to sell, because from their perspective, you're doing all the work, the money's still rolling in, they're not working as hard, and they have a good game. And so you may be required to overpay because there's no particular law that they've broken, there's no covenant to the agreement that they've broken, and you're going to have to live with this as a lesson about what you're going to put in your operating agreement next time you take on a partner. An example of a semi-friendly buyout is I worked with a client who was a minority shareholder in a company, and he discovered that the majority shareholder had been siphoning company funds, in effect making illegal distributions off into a pet project, basically another company, which would have been okay, except he hadn't been paying dividends to my client, who was the minority partner. We called him on it. We used that as leverage to secure positive buyout terms because the option was that we were going to sue him for fraud and unjust enrichment and punitive damages. So instead, we were able to use that as leverage to negotiate a buyout by my partner, who only owned 10% of the company, of the remaining 90%. And that wound up being a springboard for what was a $3 million purchase into what became a $150 million business empire. There was a company who needed to buy out the partner because they had been doing some bad things for the company. The company shareholder agreement clearly triggered a buy-sell scenario. A valuation was required as part of the buy-sell scenario. The selling shareholder had an opportunity to appeal by getting another valuation done, but the second valuation came within 10% of the value that I had. So my valuation was upheld. And so as a result, we were able to get the bad actor out of the company. You have a very good opportunity to buy out your partner with minimal distraction, emotional distress, or worse, risk of litigation. That's what I think about best practices for buying out your partner. But what do you think? Leave a comment below and share with us your experience with buying out a partner, whether you've been involved in the transaction yourself or maybe you've just been an innocent bystander. Thanks for watching this installment of Your Business Value. And if you received value from this video, please consider liking and subscribing and let me know in the comments what topics you would like me to cover next.